I hope you're having a wonderful day. My name is Luke, but I go by Farmer Luke at McDonough School and Farm Hill School, where I'm the FoodCorps AmeriCorps service member for Middletown Public Schools. Welcome to All Things Apples. I'm here today to show you Russell Library's awesome new Charlie cart, read you a little story, learn a little bit about apples, and make some applesauce. I hope you enjoy, and so let's get started. This is the Charlie cart. It's like a whole kitchen on wheels. You can see inside each of these drawers, they have blenders, mixing bowls, all sorts of cups and graters, knives for cooking with and towels, a pot, some cutting boards. They even have a whole oven in here that pulls out. The Charlie cart has just about everything you could need for making a pretty simple recipe. You can see on this side, they have all sorts of measuring cups. It's really pretty cool. I'm excited to be working with the Charlie cart and Russell Library to show all the things that it can do. This is a story I love called the Apple Orchard Riddle. It's about how our food grows, where it comes from, and rethinking the way we look at the world. The Apple Orchard Riddle by Margaret McNamara and G. Brian Karras. The kids in Mr. Tiffin's class were going on a field trip. "Hurry up, Tara," said Robert. "You'll miss the bus." See Tara lagging behind. Tara took a seat by herself next to the window. She liked to look outside and wonder about things. "Tara's in dreamland again," said Anna. "The lights are on, but nobody's home," said Eleanor. Tara didn't hear them. She was too busy daydreaming. There's Tara. When they got to the apple orchard, everybody hurried off the bus. Everybody except Tara. Tara walked off slowly. "It takes me a little more time to do things," she said. "Yes, I've noticed," said Mr. Tiffin. The class gathered around the orchard's owner, Farmer Hills. "Today," she said, "we're going to take a tour of the orchard. We'll see how apples are picked and how cider is pressed. We'll watch apples get peeled by a special machine, and we'll pick some apples off the trees. Plus, I have a riddle for you to solve," said Mr. Tiffin. "What's the riddle?" asked Charlie. Mr. Tiffin said, "Show me a little red house with no windows, no door, but with a star inside." "That's it?" said Jake. "That's the riddle?" "That's the riddle," said Mr. Tiffin. "Your job is to find the answer." "How are we going to have time to figure this out? Well, we'll also have to learn about apples," asked Molly. "Are you sure this is fair?" "Yes, I'm sure," said Mr. Tiffin. "I'm not very good at tests," Tara said. "That's lucky, because this is not a test," said Mr. Tiffin. The class walked along a path lined with trees, stretching away as far as they could see. "We grow 20 varieties of apples here," Farmer Hills said. "Who can name some apple varieties?" "Macintosh," said Alex. "Granny Smith," said Jeremy. "Crispin, Fuji, Gala, Red Delicious, Golden Delicious, McCown,
Thank you, Eleanor, said Mr. Tiffin. Our varieties ripen at different times, so we pick them from the late summer to early fall, said Farmer Hills. These pointy ladders are what we use to pick the apples off the highest branches. I'm so tall, I probably wouldn't need a ladder, said Robert. Probably not, said Farmer Hills. See them picking the apples? These branches are so low, we can all reach, said Charlie. That's right, said Farmer Hills. Only pick apples off the trees, not off the ground, she said. To pick an apple, twist the stem till the fruit comes off the branch. She showed the class how to do it and gave them each a small bag for holding apples. They twisted and picked till their bags were full. Tara didn't pick any apples. Instead, she sat under a tree and looked at the sky. What was that riddle again? She asked. Show me a little red house with no windows and no door, but with a star inside, said Eleanor, who was good at tests. There was an apple on the branch right above Tara's head. Tara twisted it off. This is red, she said. Farmer Hills showed the class where the apples were stored. We keep the apples cold and fresh in this storage barn, she said. That way, folks can enjoy them all year round. Jake noticed something about the building. A red house, said Jake. And look, no windows. But it has 2 doors, said Anna. And Farmer Hills just said it had apples inside, not stars, said Eleanor. So this is not the answer to the riddle, said Jake. Correct, said Eleanor. Tara wasn't looking at the barn. She was looking at her apple. She saw a tiny worm burrowing into it. Hey, look who lives here, she said. Yuck, don't eat that one, said Robert. I won't, said Tara. She laid the wormy apple carefully on the ground. Mr. Tiffin tossed her an apple out of his bag, and she took a bite. At the cider press, Farmer Hills put on a raincoat and a hat before she got close to the machine. Making cider must be a messy business, said Mr. Tiffin. And noisy too, said Farmer Hills. The class watched as freshly washed apples traveled up a chute to get chopped up into tiny pieces. This is called pulp, said Farmer Hills. Pulp, said Eleanor. Nice word. Next, a farmhand used a hose to spray the pulp into the canvas sheets. Cool, said Jeremy. Finally, the sheets of pulp were pressed down hard. The juice flows through these sheets into a hose, said Farmer Hills. Then it gets pumped into a big metal tank for one last treatment. And then it's cider? Asked Charlie. Then it's sterilized, and then it's cider, said Farmer Hills. Robert spotted an old tractor as he walked across the farmyard. The tractor was red with rust. Hey, he called. This tractor doesn't have a window or a door. Alex and Charlie ran over. That's because it's a tractor, not a house, said Alex. It could be a house. For mice, said Charlie. Mice sometimes live in a tractor's seat. Alex and Charlie and Robert poked around the seat. There were no mice. Maybe there's a star inside, said Alex. Robert and Charlie looked all over the tractor. It had a steering wheel and a gas gauge and a couple of pedals. But no star, said Charlie. The apple peeler was the next stop. We use the peeled apples from pies and cakes, said Farmer Hills. She turned the machine on. It peeled each apple in the blink of an eye. Whoa, said Jeremy. That's fast. Do it again. Molly and Kimmy peeled into the machine, but they did not get too close. It's sort of red, said Kimmy, even though it's also a little silver. And there are definitely no windows, said Molly. No door either, said Jeremy. So we win. Yeah, but where's the star? Kimmy asked. The three of them watched as the machine peeled the apples one after another. No star here, said Kimmy. At the end of the tour, Farmer Hills took the class to the farm stand. Help yourselves to a cup of apple cider and a cider donut, she said. Just one each, said Mr. Tiffin. But Tara's not eating hers, said Jake. Tara was still mucking on the core of her apple. Aren't you done with that yet? Said Robert. Not yet, said Tara. She chewed every last bit of it till she got to the seeds. 5 seeds, she said. Just then, Mr. Tiffin looked at his watch. Hey class, he called. The bus will be here soon. Let's talk about what we learned today. We learned that apples come in a lot of different varieties, said Molly. Crispin, Fuji, Gala, Red Delicious, Golden Delicious, McCown, said Eleanor. Cider presses make a lot of noise, said Jeremy. Donuts are yummy, said Jake. How about the riddle? Said Mr. Tiffin. There doesn't seem to be an answer, said Eleanor. I told you it was no fair, said Molly. Tara walked over to Mr. Tiffin. She had 5 apple seeds in one hand and a round red apple in another. She handed Mr. Tiffin the apple. This is a little red house with no windows and no door, said Tara. That's not a house, said Jake. It is if you're a worm, said Tara. Mr. Tiffin smiled at Tara. Go on, he said. I think there's a star inside this apple, said Tara, where nobody can see it. If nobody can see it, who cares? Said Robert. I care, said Mr. Tiffin. Let's take a look. The class gathered around. Mr. Tiffin took the apple out of Tara's hand. Where's the hidden star? He asked. You'll see it if you cut the apple this way, right across the middle, said Tara. Mr. Tiffin borrowed a small knife from Farmer Hills. He cut the apple in half, right across the middle. When he pulled the apple apart, the class could see its 5-pointed star. Hey, Tara was right, said Molly. Just then, the bus rumbled down the lane. Let's give a cheer for Farmer Hills, class, said Mr. Tiffin. And they did. The donuts were great, Jake shouted. The class grabbed to their jackets and bags and ran to go home. Come on, Tara, said Mr. Tiffin. When she got to the bus, Tara chose a seat by herself. She took a bite of an apple with a star inside. Then she looked out the window so she could daydream a little more. that's the end of the story. As we read, Tara discovered a really cool feature of apples that's important for how they grow. If you cut them in half sideways, right down the middle, being careful as you cut, you can see how each apple has room for 5 seeds on the inside. Every plant that produces fruit, regardless of how it grows, has 6 really important parts. It has roots that grow out under the ground and gather nutrients that are important for helping it grow. It has a trunk or a stem that holds it tall and gives it structure. It has leaves that help it gather energy from the sun to fuel its growth. They have flowers, which are important for reproduction as flowers are pollinated. And when the flowers are pollinated, they produce fruit, like apples. And those fruit have seeds on the inside that grow into new plants using all of the nutrients and energy that are in the fruit. Mr. Tiffin's class got to visit one of their local apple orchards. An orchard is a type of farm that grows fruits that come from trees. Did you know that October is National Farm to School Month? Farm to School is when schools work directly with local farms and orchards instead of companies that ship food from across the country or even across the world to help provide fresh fruits and veggies for growing kids. Middletown has a ways to go before it has a steady farm to school program, but many schools across the state of Connecticut and across the country regularly partner with local farms and orchards to help kids have good access to yummy, fresh food. To recognize the end of National Farm to School Month, I wanted to highlight apples in Connecticut. A lot of people in Middletown are familiar with Lyman orchards, but there are also at least 65 different farms and orchards across Connecticut that produce apples. There are about 2,500 varieties of apples that grow across the country, and over 7,500 varieties of apples that grow across the entire world. One thing I find really interesting about apples is that there were none in America or across the United States before Europeans came here several hundred years ago. They brought apples with them. Apples actually came from the mountains of Kazakhstan in Central Asia. If you're interested in learning more about apple varieties, where you can pick them before the season is over, or find new recipes for how you can use apples, feel free to visit ctapples.org. They have plenty of great information there. Now, let's get to making applesauce. I posted the recipe with all the ingredients underneath the video, but just in case you need a little bit of a reminder, I have 6 apples, 4 teaspoons of lemon juice, 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, 2 teaspoons of sugar, and 2/3 of a cup of water. And that's all you'll need to make your applesauce. First, you want to wash and peel all of your apples. And use a peeler, just like this. You'll then want to cut your apples in half. Once you have all 6 of your apples cut into halves, you can cut each piece into a half again. Now remember, this recipe makes about 6 cups if you use 6 apples. And as you're cutting them into quarters, you can cut the core out of the apples. Those are a little bit tough and bitter, and you don't want to eat them. Ideally, you can have some sort of compost available. That way you can just put your cores and all the peels of your apples right into the compost. You're going to be very careful with how you hold your knife. You're going to have your finger down the side of the knife to keep it steady, not going down the top. And when you cut, you want to use your hands on the side just to guide. Make sure your fingers are curled away, that way they don't get in the way of the knife. And you might not, that way you make sure that you don't accidentally cut yourself. Now, if you're a kid making applesauce, just make sure you have an adult around to make sure that you're using a knife properly, and especially when you're working with hot surfaces. Make sure that you have somebody there who knows what they're doing and can guide you when you're using these appliances. So once you have all of your apples cut into quarters with the cores cut out, you're going to slice each piece into large dices. Once you have all of your apple pieces diced, you can add them into a large mixing bowl. There you have some diced apples. After that, you're going to take those 4 teaspoons of lemon juice, which you can get when you have a whole lemon. You cut your lemon in half, just like we cut the apples in half at first. And then you can use a citrus reamer, which looks kind of like this. And then you'll twist and squeeze the lemon until all the juice comes out. And so, we add our 4 teaspoons of lemon juice into the bowl. We're going to stir that lemon juice. That lemon juice, the acids in it that make it sour, are going to keep your apples from spoiling or going bad. To help keep it fresh. Now, in case you don't know how to measure, you're just going to take a little measuring spoon. You're going to look for the one that says 1 teaspoon, or if you're doing a different recipe, whatever the measurement is that you're using. You're going to take the measuring spoon, stick it into whatever you're measuring, in this case, our ground cinnamon, and stick it up so that you get a big spoonful, and then you're going to swipe off the top so that you get a nice, good measurement. Sometimes when you're baking, you want a more exact measurement. Otherwise, your baking recipe can go wrong. For applesauce, it's okay if you add a little heaping scoop of cinnamon. So now that the lemon is mixed into our diced apples, we're going to take our cinnamon and sprinkle it over the top. And we're going to do the exact same with our sugar. And it's the same amount, 2 teaspoons of each. The cinnamon adds flavor. The sugar will both make it sweeter and cover up the taste and acid of the lemon juice, and it will also help preserve your applesauce so it lasts longer. Now you're going to mix those in very well because you want them to coat all the apples so that all the apples get some of that good flavor. There you go. There's some diced apples with some cinnamon and some sugar tossed in, along with some lemon juice. I'm going to take this mixture and put it into a stock pot. And the stock pot is just going to sit on our heating surface. Once all of that is put in there, we'll scrape out any missing pieces with any sort of rubber plastic scraper, or a spoon if that works for you. Just much as you can out of the bowl into the stock pot. Once it's in there, and our heating service is turned on, you can add your water. It's 2/3 of a cup of water. When you're measuring water or other liquids, it's important to do so by looking at them from down at the table. That way, you can see that it's leveled at the exact measurement that you want, and you don't put in too much or too little. I'm going to cook this for about a minute over medium to high heat. After about a minute of cooking over high to medium heat, you want to put a cover on your applesauce and then let it continue to cook for about 10 to 15 minutes, stirring occasionally, making sure that the apples don't burn. After your applesauce cooks down after about 10 to 15 minutes, then turn off the heat, make sure you take it off, and then you can keep stirring it using the wooden spoon to whatever desired consistency or level of chunkiness or smoothness you want. I like my applesauce a little bit chunky, so I left some bigger pieces of apple in there. But if you keep cooking it a bit longer and even mash it up a little bit, you can get an applesauce as smooth as you'd like. After your applesauce has been allowed to cool just a little bit, feel free to serve it. It's really delicious.
I hope you're able to enjoy some yummy fresh applesauce. Applesauce will keep refrigerated in a highly sealed container for about 3 to 5 days. Make sure you can relax, try to enjoy the outdoors while it's still warm enough to get out, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for watching.